everyone. I am Shania.
And I'm Dr. Garcia.
And we are going to do 10 quick questions about fertility, women's health, egg freezing, and everything in between.
That's right.
I am freezing my eggs, and I'm 25 years old. I'm in my Ph.D., and I had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns and a lot of doubts with this whole process, especially being my age, not knowing any other woman at all that was in their 20s doing this procedure. And it seemed wild and it seemed really taboo. I was very hesitant to share it online because I didn't want it to come across as unprofessional. I have years of training ahead of me, and I don't want to plan for a family. So this is why we're doing the video, for every woman out there that might have questions.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting that you were worried about it being unprofessional. Like, it sort of shows the kind of pressure that women are facing in today's world. I actually feel very passionate about this. I also had many years of training to become a doctor, and I didn't have my children until I was done my years of training. So I was in my early 30s, and my second child came when I was 40 years of age. And sure enough, I had infertility. May or may not have been related to my age, I'll never know, but it was very difficult. When going through infertility at 35 and 40 years of age, and now there are a lot of women who are pushing the fertility conversation and then having to face those conversations later on. So I don't think there's anything unprofessional about talking about it. As a matter of fact, if you are her PI and you give her a problem for freezing her eggs and coming after you, because I think that Shania is setting such a great example in opening up this conversation. And I mean, what better way to be dedicated to your career than thinking about it beforehand and freezing your eggs and having those options when the time comes to do that.
Give us a rundown on what questions women should be asking themselves, their partners, their friends, having in common.
The first thing is asking yourself, what are your goals for family? So that's really important to have that understanding. And even if you're not sure, because honestly, there's many women in their 20s who just are not sure, they should at least be thinking about it and talking to their doctors about it. I would say make sure that you've got regular cycles, make sure that there aren't really any barriers for future conception. There's no such a thing as a fertility test. So you cannot really go to the doctor and say, do a test and tell me I'll be fertile in 10 years. It doesn't work like that. No, we wish it were, but there is not such a thing. But certainly speaking to your doctor about your goals.
What questions were you asking yourself when you were struggling with infertility that may inform your philosophy every day in your practice?
Was it my fault? Could I have done it differently? What if I had children earlier? What if I had... Well, I didn't ask about freezing my eggs because I knew that technology wasn't available when I was 25. Should I have started trying sooner? What can I do differently? All of the things. Will I ever be a mother? That was probably the question I asked myself all the time. Would this ever work?
What is the procedure like to freeze your eggs? What are the steps?
So the first step would be talking to a fertility specialist. That's number one. Sort of talking about what your goals are, how old you are, your medical history, so taking a history, first of all. Then the fertility specialist is going to want to do one main thing, which is to check your ovarian reserve. And the reason to do that...
And what is that?
We're going to talk about it in a moment, but the reason to do that... That's a good question. The reason to do that is to determine what kind of stimulation protocol you need. So ovarian reserve is basically a way to estimate the number of eggs that you're going to get during an egg-free cycle. So women that have high ovarian reserve, that means they have a lot of eggs. Normally when we do a stimulation cycle, we would expect to get anywhere between 12 to 15, even to 20 eggs. Women that have low ovarian reserve, we expect to get less than that. And the number of eggs that you get at the time of egg freezing cycle, depending on how old you are, determines what your chances are for live birth. So if you are, let's say, 35 years of age, you need to have more eggs for a live birth than if you are 25 years of age. So that's why it is important to have a good discussion with your fertility specialist about how old you are and about what your timeline in terms of when are you thinking to start a family and how many children you want to have. So your fertility specialist can counsel you on how many egg freezing cycles you'll need based on your ovarian reserve. And how we measure the ovarian reserve is based on two things. One is a blood test called AMH level, and another one is an ultrasound. And the ultrasound is basically looking at the little follicles in the ovaries and what is called unprofessional count. And those two things, AMH level and ultrasound put together, can allow your REI to estimate, making it a very good educated guess as to the number of eggs that would likely be retrieved in one egg-free cycle.
Okay. And is 25 too young to freeze your eggs?
No.
Get this one. If you are watching this and you've asked me that question, I'm pointing right at you.
It's a great time to freeze your eggs. I don't think that if you're 20 out there, 25, and you can't do it now, and you think I'm gonna do it at 28 or 30, that's perfectly fine as well. So this is not to say that every 25-year-old needs to absolutely be running and freeze their eggs right now. But if you are 25 and you know that you're not going to try for a pregnancy in the near future, and you have career goals and things that you want to do, it is not too young to freeze your eggs. It's actually the perfect time. So I would say anywhere between 24 and 34 years of age are probably the best time to freeze your eggs. It doesn't mean you can't freeze them later. It just means that the number of eggs that you'll need for a live birth get bigger and bigger. And sometimes as women get older, then you might need more egg-free cycles to get.
I got this question from Instagram. Elizabeth, what ways can women optimize their egg health and fertility? The burning question.
The burning question. That question has two pieces to it. So in general, so you asked what women can do to optimize their eggs and fertility, and then you said, if I'm 25 and I'm not trying, what can I do? Those are a little bit two different questions. So in general, in terms of optimizing your egg quality, I would say all the things that we talk about are good and healthy for you, are good for your eggs. That would be good sleep, that would be proper nutrition, that would be movement and exercise, that would be environmental exposure to toxins like marijuana and cigarette smoking and excessive use of alcohol. A little bit it's okay, but too much it's not. So all of those things can improve egg quality. Women who are actively trying to conceive should be taking a prenatal vitamin with folic acid, vitamin D, especially in this country where there isn't a lot of sun, and as well as potentially a coenzyme Q10, which is an antioxidant that can help with egg quality. Women who are older and actively trying to conceive. When you're 25 years old and you cannot freeze your eggs, and you are thinking, okay, I'm 25 now, I cannot freeze my eggs, I'm not actively trying, what can I do? Then being on the birth control pill is perfectly fine. It does not cause decrease in fertility long term, does not cause decrease in egg quality long term, so you can be on the birth control pill. And then work on being healthy, which you are great at talking about on Instagram. So thanks to Shania, I got a desk under a working desk in my office. She saw it. So find ways to move and exercise and eat healthy and sleep well and get enough daylight and avoid things like I was saying before, cigarettes and things like that, and that can help. But certainly being on the birth control pill is not a problem at all in terms of your long-term fertility.
And if you are in your 20s and you find out, is there a way for us to know our egg, can I do my AMH testing before?
Yes, you can do, anybody can do their AMH. Now, you gotta be careful though. What does AMH really tell you? It is not a fertility test. Mm-hmm. So if you're a 25-year-old woman who is not in a relationship, it's not freezing her eggs, it's not trying to conceive, there isn't a lot of value to doing an AMH, because if she were to do it, what that information would say is, hey, 25-year-old woman, here's your AMH of 20 picomoles per mil. This means that if I were to do an egg retrieval on you today, I'm going to get approximately 25 eggs. But if she's not freezing her eggs or doing IVF or trying, then that information is not valuable. That AMH is not telling that 25-year-old woman that in 10 years she's going to be fine. It is not telling that 25-year-old woman that the quality of her eggs is great right now. And it's not telling that 25-year-old woman that she's going to be able to get 20 eggs 10 years from now or 5 years from now when she's trying to conceive. So there really isn't a lot of value unless you're actually freezing your eggs or you're trying to conceive and thinking about IVF.
And is every woman born with similar number, like the same amount of eggs?
Oh, beautiful question. So the issue of egg decline is an interesting one. So the number of I bet you didn't know this.
No,
I haven't taught you this.
I
yet.
didn't know this.
I've taught her a lot of things, but I don't think I did.
No.
So the number of eggs that a woman is born with is actually genetically determined, and it's determined when women are babies in our mother's womb. So at 20 weeks of gestation, the number of primordial cells go into the ovaries and populate the ovaries, and that becomes your ovarian reserve. So there are genetic things that could happen at that point to determine that. Sometimes the environmental exposure, that's not really very clearly understood why some women have low ovarian reserve throughout their life and other women don't, but it is determined when women are 20-week fetuses inside the mother's womb. Even at that point, so there is all of these millions of germ cells in there, and then some of them die at the time of birth, and some of them continue to die. And then by puberty, then they become mature, and then every month there is one egg that ovulates, but there are many eggs that die. So that happens throughout the whole reproductive life. And then as women get older, two things happen. The number of eggs decrease because you have the number of eggs you're ever going to have the day you're born. You're not making more eggs. You're ovulating one egg a month, but you're not making more eggs. So the number of eggs decrease over time, but also the quality of the eggs decrease because the eggs that you're ovulating at 40 years of age are literally 40-year-old eggs. They're not eggs that you made recently. You ovulated them recently, but you've had them since the day you were born. So the eggs that are left when women are older tend to have lower quality, and then the quantity decreases as well.
So I literally can't do anything to improve the health of my eggs right now.
You can.
I was born with them?
You cannot do anything to improve the number of eggs that you have or your ovarian reserve. You were born with that, and it is genetically determined. The health of your eggs, that's what I was talking about.
Lifestyle.
Lifestyle. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Lifestyle.
Yes.
Stress management.
Yes.
How painful is it? So I'm on day 2, and for me, day 1, the biggest barrier was a mental barrier of the idea of like literally injecting yourself with medication. It wasn't painful. I had no cramps or anything. But on average, what do your patients tell you?
It's not usually painful. Women that have a lot of eggs, sometimes as they get to day 10 or 12, they might be having a little bit more pain because now the ovaries are big and they're full of eggs. But that would be the last 2 days of the stimulation. By that time, we're usually ready to give you the trigger. The actual process of retrieving the eggs, here where I work at MY Fertility Center, we have an anesthesiologist that comes from the hospital, and we put you to sleep completely. So it's absolutely pain-free for the retrieval. Sometimes, depending on what kind of medications you're given at different clinics for the sedation, sometimes it could be more or less painful depending on how you respond to different pain medications.
I have a lot of friends who are in medicine, in academia, or in the startup world, and so we can't take time off. For women who are like, crap, I can't take time off, what is the lifestyle changes that most women go through?
The time required, definitely the day of the egg retrieval, that's one day that you need to be off. That's not negotiable because you'll be taking medications, you can't drive, you might be able to read your paper and answer a couple of emails later in the day, but you need to be at the clinic. So depending on where you live, that could be a barrier. You don't live too far from here, so that's good. But that could be a barrier. So definitely the day of the egg retrieval. Leading up to the egg retrieval, there might be about 3 to 4 appointments, monitoring appointments at the clinic. And prior to that, most of the appointments can be done virtually. So I would say the entire time commitment from the egg-free cycle, I would say it's about 2 weeks where you have to be available and present. But physically, you need to be at the clinic for sure one day and maybe 3 to 4 days for monitoring before that.
And in terms of the freezing the eggs, these frozen eggs, do I keep them in my own freezer or where are they kept? And how can I trust that they will be stored well?
They are definitely not in your own freezer. They're stored. That's for chicken and shrimp and cheese for the cheese boards.
Yeah, my cheese for my cheese boards.
the eggs are frozen at the clinic where you do your egg retrieval. Here they're frozen in-house at the clinic. They're frozen in a tank. We normally, depending on how many eggs we get, we freeze them in twos, and then we can, so we don't need to thaw them out all at the same time, depending on what your goals are once you're ready to use them. And there are many safety measures. There's alarms and things that happen in the lab to monitor the temperature and the pH and all the things.
What's the average price range for this process?
So I wouldn't know necessarily about other clinics, but generally speaking, I would say between 9,000 and 12,000 in that range for an egg-free cycle. You need to add the cost of the medications for that. The gonadotropins, which are the injections, they are expensive, and they can cost anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000 depending on how much you need. If you have really good ovarian reserve, then you need less medication. If you have poor ovarian reserve, you need more medications. That sometimes can be covered by insurance. And then there is the cost of storage yearly, many times, because we know that young women are going to use them in the near future. Then they could be like one storage fee that lasts like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, depending on whatever your clinic does. Here we do 5 years.
So the 5 year.
You got the 5 years, that's right.
Piece of advice you have for anyone thinking about their fertility that, they haven't planned anything in regards to freezing eggs or fertility goals at all. So what's a consideration you have just for women to feel empowered today?
Educate yourself. I mean, the many times you were asking me today what keeps me going, but one of the things that breaks my heart is when I see women in my office and I am explaining things to them and I'm telling them about age and egg quality and egg quantity, and they say, I didn't know. I wish I had known. So it doesn't mean you have to freeze your eggs tomorrow, but please just get information, educate yourself, talk to your family doctor, have a consultation with a fertility specialist. That in Ontario is covered by OHIP. Even if you decide that you don't want to freeze your eggs, so you don't have the money right now, at least have that conversation so that you know what the options are and what it looks like. And ask all the questions and educate yourself, I think. And that goes for everything else in women's health. It goes for your pap smear, it goes for your period, it goes for your birth control pill, for your contraception. It goes for, making sure that you are protecting yourself from sexually transmitted diseases. Your HPV vaccine. It goes for all of those things. They're all important, not just about freezing eggs, but anything related to your health. It's important when you're thinking about your future fertility.
I call it the Disney effect as well, the fairy tale effect, that as women we're born and we think that I'm going to snap my fingers, get pregnant on the first try, and have a natural birth, and even carry my own baby, all of those things we assume are the norm. And I, up to now, even before this egg freezing journey, I just thought that would be my norm as well, which could possibly not be the case. And it's almost like a fantasy, I think, a lot of us live in, but it's not our fault.
No, exactly. I think it's everywhere. You're right. It's I like that, the Disney effect. It's everywhere, and I certainly felt the same when I was your age, and when I was going through my things. I always thought, okay, I'm gonna study really hard. I'm gonna get a degree. I'm gonna meet Prince Charming. I did meet Prince Charming. My husband is awesome.
Shout out to you if you're watching this.
He doesn't watch anything. You're gonna meet Prince Charming, and then get married and have babies right away. And that it's not what happened, and that is not what happened to many women. So that's why knowing your options, it's really important. And also know that there is no shame. I had so much shame when I was going through fertility, and this is one of the reasons that I am so supportive of you doing the Shania, because the number of times that patients in all ethnicity, but especially South Asian, definitely, but in all ethnicity, they come to me because there's so much shame and they don't want to tell this person and that person, and their mother-in-law says this and their sister-in-law says that, and they are afraid to ask about their bodies. They are afraid to talk about these things. There is so much taboo around it. So long answer to your question, but I would say empower yourself, educate yourself, ask all the questions, and make sure that you know and that you can make choices from a place of power and knowledge and not from a place of fear.
And on that note, thank you, Dr. Garcia, for sitting down with us today. And I hope that for every woman watching this, every person watching this, every partner of a girl, every mother, every parent, that you do empower your women in your community to talk about fertility, just generally. Talk about fertility. And if you aren't already following Dr. Garcia on Instagram, it'll be in the bio below. I don't do YouTube, so we'll figure that one out. But
I don't either.
Yeah. And if you are following along on the TikTok or on Instagram, just share how you feel and share any comments that you have, and continue this conversation with the women in your life, with your friends, with your mom, and we'll see you one day next time.
That's